China to evacuate its nationals from Japan following Fukushima explosions. Death toll from quake and tsunami keeps rising. And the observatory says Japanese radiation leak won't spread to Hong Kong.
Good evening. China has announced a voluntary evacuation of its nationals from areas worst affected by Japan's earthquake and the subsequent damage to nuclear reactors. This follows another explosion this morning at the Fukushima nuclear power plant. Japan has ordered 140,000 people to stay indoors because of dangerous levels of radiation leaking from the plant. Radiation levels in Chiba Prefecture, neighboring Tokyo, are reported to be more than 10 times above normal levels, but the government says it's still not a problem. We begin our coverage tonight with this report from Jenny Lam about the evacuation of Chinese nationals.
A spokesman for the Chinese embassy in Japan announced this afternoon a voluntary evacuation of Chinese nationals from 4 prefectures in Japan, which have been hard hit by last Friday's earthquake and tsunami. The areas are also under the threat of radiation leak following a series of explosions at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. The Chinese embassy will provide buses to bring them to Narita and Niigata airports. The Chinese government is not providing flights out of Japan at this point, but embassy staff will help with flight arrangements. The 4 prefectures are Fukushima, where the nuclear power plant is located, Miyagi, which was hardest hit by the earthquake and the subsequent tsunami wave, Ibaraki and Iwate. Chinese passport holders are asked to gather at specific locations where embassy staff will organize transportation to bring them out of the disaster zones. In Miyagi, they should go to the Sendai International Hotel. The telephone contact number for the Chinese embassy personnel in Sendai is 080-4329-9651. In Fukushima, those who want to leave should go to the square outside the east exit of Fukushima train station. The contact number there is 080-3931-9656. Also in Fukushima, Chinese nationals can also go to the municipal halls in Koriyama-shi and Aizu-Wakamatsu-shi. The number to call, 080-3315-8321. In Ibaraki, the assembly points is the Cows Exchange Center in Hokota. Contact number is 090-2230-0371 or 090-1128-3856 or 080-4178-3088. The assembly point in Iwate has not yet been announced. All this information and more is available on the Chinese Embassy's website at www.china-embassy.or.jp. Women and children and the elderly will be given priority to get on the buses. The embassy also advises people who remain in disaster areas to stay indoors as far as possible to minimize possible exposure to radiation. If they need to go out, they should wear long trousers, long sleeve clothing and cover the mouth and nose with a facial mask. Jenny Lam, TVB News.
Japanese officials say radiation levels at the Fukushima nuclear power plant reached harmful levels following a new explosion this morning. The facility's spent fuel storage pond is also on fire. But latest reports say radiation levels have now fallen dramatically. Tony Sabine reports.
Fear stalks the streets of Japan as the country struggles to deal with the world's most serious nuclear crisis since the Chernobyl disaster of 1986. In areas around the Fukushima nuclear power plant, government workers carried out radiation checks on people after yet another explosion, the 3rd in 4 days. Today's blast appeared to damage the containment vessel of the plant's number 2 reactor. Officials also reported a fire at the number 4 reactor, which houses spent fuel rods. The explosion and fire came as a fresh blow to a region already reeling from the impact of last Friday's devastating earthquake and tsunami, which killed thousands of people and left millions more without food, water or fuel along Japan's northeast. The tremor knocked out power to the essential cooling systems at the Fukushima plant, needed to keep nuclear fuel from melting down. Today's explosion and fire only raise fears that efforts to control the situation are failing. Sure enough, Japanese officials admitted today that more radiation had leaked and that the levels were harmful. Japan's Chief Cabinet Secretary Yukio Edano said radiation readings at the plant were so high that people without protection gear were in danger. More than 50 technicians are working around the clock to cool the overheating reactors and prevent a catastrophe. But all non-essential workers, plus any remaining people living close by, have been ordered to leave. Japanese Prime Minister Naoto Kan urged people to remain calm, but said those living within 30 kilometers of the plant should stay indoors and keep their windows and doors shut. A no-fly zone has been set up around the plant, while roads to and from the area have been shut to non-essential traffic. With the situation getting desperate, Japan has asked the United Nations nuclear watchdog, the IAEA, and the US for help. Radiation readings in towns and cities dozens of kilometers away from the plant are already 10 times higher than normal, while low levels of radiation have been reported in the capital, Tokyo. But officials continue to insist the health risk to people beyond Fukushima Prefecture is minimal. Still, with radiation levels around the nuclear power plant continuing to cause concern, there are doubts whether Japanese authorities are really being honest about the potential danger this crisis could pose to people. Tony Sabine, TVB News.
Now, the official death toll from Friday's disaster has topped 2,700 people, but that number will likely jump further. Rescue workers have had little luck finding survivors so far. Priscilla Ng has that story.
Yet more dramatic footage of the tsunami's destruction. This amateur video shows huge waves battered Iwate Prefecture after the quake hit on Friday afternoon. Authorities say the city of Rikuzen-Takata, with a population of 23,000, was almost completely wiped out in the disaster. For those in the affected areas, time has stood still. Ruins all across Miyagi Prefecture from the magnitude 9 earthquake. More than 10,000 people may have died in the prefecture alone. About half of the 17,000 residents of the town of Minami-Sanriku are still missing, feared dead. Rescuers continue their grim task of recovering bodies from the rubble. This fire illustrated the difficulties relief workers are facing. Emergency crews were struggling to put out the blaze near a railway station. But the water that was supposed to be used to fight the fire was sent to an evacuation center for survivors instead. More heart-wrenching scenes here in Miyagi Prefecture as this woman continued the search for her missing mother. She hasn't had any luck so far. And the news from rescue workers is not encouraging.
Our team hasn't found anyone surviving.
A different set of problems in the capital. Panic in Tokyo on news of the nuclear leaks. Long lines at petrol stations today as drivers waited an hour to fill up tanks. Shoppers also snapped up daily necessities at stores and supermarkets. Some shops were limiting how many bags of toilet paper each customer can buy a day. Priscilla Ng, TVB News.
Hong Kong people can also board the buses provided by the Chinese embassy. The Hong Kong government has extended its black travel alert for all 4 of the prefectures where Chinese nationals can evacuate voluntarily. An estimated 1,700 Hong Kong people are still in Japan. Jenny Lam reports.
The Immigration Department has received more than 1,000 calls for help regarding Hong Kong people in Japan. 32 people have not yet been accounted for. The black travel alert has already been issued for Fukushima on Saturday. That has now been extended to include Miyagi, Ibaraki and Iwate. That means travelers are advised not to go to those places. A red travel alert applies to the rest of Japan.
Tokyo is some 240 kilometers from the nuclear power plant. It is really a very, very far distance away. And the latest information we have received is that the situation in Tokyo is still normal.
A former president of the Hong Kong Institute of Engineers, Leung Kwang-ho, said no abnormal radiation levels have been detected in Hong Kong or Taiwan. The Center for Food Safety also gave reassurance that all food items imported from Japan are strictly monitored for possible contamination. Jenny Lam, TVB News.
The Hong Kong Observatory has played down fears radiation leaks in Japan will affect the territory. Meantime, there are growing concerns about supply shortages of Japanese food imports. More on that from Andrew Lau.
This shop sells dried abalones and scallops imported.
近震央嘅多個縣城破壞嚴重，震央附近4座核電廠暫時關閉，幾百萬戶人家冇電力供應。東京附近嘅千葉縣有煉油廠大火。
8.9級強烈地震嘅威力喺日本放送協會位於仙台嘅辦公室完全感受到。持續超過30秒，令到四周陷入一片混亂。市內多處有民居着火焚燒。由大廈跌落嚟嘅瓦礫，差啲擊中逃生嘅民眾。多處電力供應暫停。仙台附近嘅氣仙沼市晚上沿岸地區被熊熊烈火完全包圍，多間建築物着火焚燒。日本傳媒報道，大火已經失控，能夠撲熄嘅機會十分渺茫。氣仙沼市住咗超過7萬名居民，市內多數係住宅、輕工業同埋漁業等嘅用地。千葉縣市原市嘅煉油廠燃氣管道喺地震之中破損。煉油廠由晏晝開始猛烈焚燒，陷入一片火海，並且發生多次爆炸，火球升上幾十米高空。除咗煉油廠，地震亦都影響核電站。震央附近嘅宮城縣一座核電站喺地震之後自動停止運作。經過初步調查，冇發現泄漏放